All right, good morning. I guess it is 8:30, so are we ready to go with Zoom? Yeah? All right, with that, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Nevada Board of, or the official name, I guess, the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners for November 4th, 2023. I'm going to ask Commissioner Wise to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And I'll ask the department to take the roll.
Chairman Caviglia,
Here.
Vice Chair Rogers, Commissioner Barnes, Commissioner Booth,
Here.
Commissioner Keel,
Here.
Commissioner McNinch,
Here.
Commissioner Walther,
Here.
Commissioner Wise, here, Commissioner Young.
Here.
All right, thank you. I'll ask the cab members in attendance to please announce themselves.
Jim Cooney, Elko. Joe Krim, Persian. Steve Marks, White Pine.
And then I'll ask the cab members on Zoom to announce themselves.
Paul Dixon Clark.
That's it.
All right. Go to agenda item number 13, public comment period. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. No action can be taken by the commission at this time. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Persons making comment are asked to begin by stating their name for the record. Any public comment in Reno? Don't see any. Any public comment on Zoom?
No.
No. All right. Agenda item number 14, approval of the agenda. This is an action item. The commission will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda for the November 4th, 2023 meeting. The commission may remove items from the agenda, continue items for consideration, or take items out of order. I guess, has everybody had a chance to read the agenda? Any questions or? All right, seeing none. Any cab comment on the agenda? Any cab comment on Zoom? No. Okay, any public comment on the agenda? Any public comment on Zoom?
No.
No. All right, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously with Vice Chair Rogers and Commissioner Barnes absent. Okay, agenda item number 15, member items, announcements, and correspondence, informational. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. The commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies for the exhibit file. Commissioners may provide hard copies of their correspondence for the written record. Correspondence sent or received by Secretary Janae may also be discussed. And I don't have anything beyond what we talked about yesterday. Anybody else? No? All right, we'll keep rolling. Agenda item number 16, county advisory boards to manage wildlife informational. CAB members may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. So any CAB items in Reno? Seeing none. Any CAB items on Zoom?
No.
No. All right. Everybody's super quiet this morning. Number 17, Nevada Department of Wildlife project updates, Secretary Janae, informational. The commission has requested that the department provide regular project updates for the ongoing projects and programs as appropriate based on geography and timing of meetings. These updates are intended to provide additional detail in addition to the summaries provided as part of the regular department activity report and are intended to educate the commission and public as to the department's ongoing duties and responsibilities.
Thank you. For the record, Alan Janae. So this morning we've got that project update. Last commission meeting, you asked for an update on mule deer projects. And so we've got both the game division and habitat division that can give you an update as to what's occurring currently and what we've done in the past on mule deer. So with that, I will pass it off. I'm not sure which one's going first, but by the shake of the head, I will say that it's Cody. Thank you.
All right.
these set up here. Everybody hear me okay? Okay, so yeah, for the record, Cody Schroeder, Staff Specialist, Department of Wildlife. So I'm just gonna go over some of the projects that we've been working on, really going back to the mid-2000s, but then get into some more of the recent stuff we've been working on here lately. Just to start off, I kind of want to just provide a little bit of a budgetary overview that my program has been responsible for. Going back to 2017 really is when kind of our mark that we started for this update. This is our W48 grant expenditures going back to fiscal year 2017. We've spent over $3.8 million on mule deer related expenses since that time. If you kind of go back there and through the timeline, you'll see the names. And we've done some changes with how we kind of manage the program in general. Obviously, we added a lot more in fiscal year 2022. That's kind of a combination of separating out how we do contracts and grants and things like that. But we've definitely been increasing in recent times. So this is funding that we've received either from outside funds, from private donations, heritage funds, other grants, other federal grants that we've received. And the donations and the heritage in particular is what we use for match for that state or that federal W48 grant that we manage with Fish and Wildlife Service. Pretty healthy donations each year. Some of our partners include Nevada Bighorns Unlimited, Mule Deer Foundation, Mule Deer Fanatics, Nevada Gold Mines, Kinross have been some of our bigger contributors to that donation. And then the heritage projects, those are kind of a combination of research that we've conducted and some of the more habitat related projects we've done. Over $1.1 million in donations and heritage funds and other grants since 2017. Alan wanted me to kind of give an overview of the overpasses, the projects we've been involved with there with DOT. So these are the three main ones I'm going to talk about: Highway 93, Pequot Summit, Silver Zone, and SR 160. Just to provide a little bit of background, I'm sure many of you have seen this before, but really this started back in 2006 with discussions between NDOW and NDOT. It was a local collaboration out in Elko County. Area biologists working with their DOT collaborator. There was about 300 deer getting hit on the highway that we were estimating on I-80 and Highway 93 per year, 300. Had several meetings. A crossing structure was discussed at 10 Mile location, and that was chosen due to the number of vehicle collisions that were there primarily and ease of construction. So that pass was completed in July of 2010. Cost $1.8 million. It was funded by Q1 monies and American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. Just keep that figure in mind, $1.8 million. That might seem like a lot of money, but it's actually pretty cheap in today's standards. And you'll see why here in a little bit. Here's another expansion of that project. 2010, we put some underpasses on, completed the exclusionary fencing. That was about $2.2 million, federal highway safety funds, and we used some of our own funds, Fish and Wildlife funds, federal funds to purchase the fencing material for that. And that really helped to get that project over the hump and actually kind of pave the way for more crossings on Pequot, that state contribution. showing that the state, the Department of Wildlife is contributing financially, investing a lot of our own funds into that. You know, providing safety for humans, but also safe passage for mule deer. Silver Zone, that was a project that NDOT was kind of already, they had some work going in that area already. It's east, farther east of Pequot, as you get towards Wendover. $1.5 million for a double overpass that crosses an interstate. That is a bargain. Those were recession costs. The construction workers, the contractors were essentially begging for work at that time, is what I'm told by NDOT. That's one of the reasons it was that cheap. And you'll see when I talk about Pequot here in a minute, kind of some of the differences in costs. This is one more recently that was completed, SR 160. So this is between the highway between Las Vegas and Pahrump. The pink polygon there is Mule Deer corridor that we've delineated. It does cross the 160 even before the pass was installed. But we were seeing a lot of collisions there on mule deer, bighorn sheep, and elk, as well as burros and other things like that. We worked with NDOT to identify this location. So that's right after that was constructed. Kind of a look from the bottom of it. For perspective, it's a really wide, for a culvert, it's really big and wide, which is ideal, especially for bighorn. I think that's Cody McKee standing there at the bottom of it. This is just kind of on the right, a look at the at grade. So if you're on the highway looking at just a little bit for perspective, you got the fencing funneling in there. So it's a real large opening, which is important, as you're going to see here in a minute. So we've already been documenting mule deer use across this structure. We're working with Arizona Game and Fish. It's actually a really cool collaborative effort with them. They have a pretty big research branch in Arizona, and they got a lot of experience monitoring these things and researching them. They've done work for us on the Boulder City bypass too. They're working on monitoring that. So a couple mule deer bucks using it right away. We documented, well, they have documented through trail cameras, sheep, bighorn sheep using the crossing structure. The bars are the approaches and crosses. The darker is when basically an animal approaches the structure, and whether they cross successfully is the lighter bars. So bighorn on the left, mule deer on the right. Interesting differences there. The peak usage seems to be in October for bighorn, whereas for mule deer, it kind of peaks there in July. Not quite sure what's going on with the timing of that. Could be some just local inner movements from water. Maybe just post fawning season for that peak for mule deer. But the bars definitely indicate successful, crossing. So that's when they come up to the crossing on the camera and they successfully cross. It's in the gray bar captured there. So other benefits, other wildlife. It's not just mule deer, although that was the highest collision for big game species. They've documented jackrabbits, bobcats, burro. Although this one was fairly interesting to me. There's actually there's been 7 approaches, but no successful crossings by burros. They're the only ones who won't use those culverts, apparently. Coyotes, quite a few of those. Gray fox, mountain lion. This figure here in the lower, let's see if my pointer works. Lower center, that's a ringtail that they documented using that. A bobcat here, and obviously coyotes. And then probably the best success from my perspective so far has been bighorn, because we were, quite worried that maybe bighorn wouldn't use those crossing structures. They tend to not want to go into dark culverts, but this one being the aspect ratio wide and open and well lit. You can see here these mature rams using that thing, and also carnivores. We had mountain lions using it and coyotes. So that was a real positive success. And this is real preliminary stuff. This is stuff that we haven't, written it up in a formal report or published it or anything. This is just kind of raw data I'm showing you here, raw pictures. Pequot Summit, very successful project. You can see the cost difference there, $22 million for that structure right there. So that's more current. And that's not even today, 2023 costs, because construction costs, steel, concrete, everything is just like skyrocketing right now. So these things are getting costlier to build, but hugely successful. The map up there in the upper right is showing the migration corridor. The red colors are the more usage. These are the middle Pequot, where we have this crossing structure here. We've got some culverts, and then there's an overpass on the west side. A little bit less use on that west side, although a lot of that data was collected pre-construction. Whoops. And so I fully expect that as we collect more caller data, we're going to get more usage of those crossing structures in the future on the outsides. But that main corridor definitely goes through Pequot Summit. That's where they want to cross, and that's where they mainly do cross. So the question is, do they work? We worked with a UNR grad student who now works for DOT, Nova Simpson, started this as her master's in 2010. She documented 16,000 crossings. This is just on Highway 93 here during 4 migrations. A lot more use on the overpass than the underpass. That might have been just the site selection. That 10-mile overpass was kind of center right there on the main part of the migration compared to, we had underpasses, culverts on either side and at HD Summit. But deer collisions immediately started being reduced about 50% with each subsequent year. So this is work from her master's. The red bar or the red arrow there indicates when the crossing structures were kind of installed. These are the vehicle collisions, the number of mule deer documenting getting hit. One of the things that we found in this study is that the actual number of collisions are very much underrepresented of what's truly out there. That animal hit database is something that's collected by counties and sheriffs and state highway patrol that goes into a database. But that's only when people collide with a deer or something and report it to the sheriff's office. Like they have usually a wreck or major damage to their vehicle. If they hit a deer and it runs off and it doesn't do much damage to their vehicle, it might not get reported. So they were actually out cruising the road, collecting carcasses and comparing that, the number of carcasses to the database. And they estimated that at least 30%, I think it was 30 to 50% of the actual carcasses out there, they might be, 50 yards off the median or the side of the road that aren't getting reported by the sheriffs or the DOT road crews. So we published that work in the Journal of Wildlife Management. I think this was in 2016. The map kind of shows the location here on 93 HD Summit area. So you have 10 Mile here with the green overpass and the yellow are the underpasses. This was Nova's work, but several collaborators from the department, Kelly Stewart at University of Nevada, myself, Mike Cox. Definitely want to give credit to Mike because he was really involved in this early on, going after some of those funds, helping DOT get federal highway funds, getting our own funds to use to match to get the funding for the fencing, instrumental in getting the collars out. That really helped us narrow down where to put them. And then Carrie, obviously, was a huge part of this. She's retired now, and Tony, of course, former director. This is some of the monitoring that we're doing currently on Pequot. We've documented vehicle collisions reduced by 80 to 90% just within this corridor, the Pequot corridor. Hugely successful. These panels, this is some work we're doing with USGS. We published this in Western Migrations, Volume 3. This is Highway 93 on the left, Pequot, and Silver Zone. So the dots indicate pre-construction mortalities, and the black dots are post-construction. So you can see the magnitude of the difference. You don't want to see black dots, but there are a few. And that's important because these things, when you put them in, they don't prevent every single mortality from occurring. They tend to get in around the outsides of the fences, and continual monitoring is important because we've actually had to extend the fencing on some of these. So the deer will learn pretty quickly they can go around the fence. They'll get trapped in the inside. There are jump outs built in to hopefully prevent that, but it does happen. Silver zone, I'm not quite sure why. It just seems to be, although it's by and large a lot fewer black dots compared to the white ones, but there are still getting hit, especially on the outsides of that fence. But overall, like I said, really successful. Shows you the power of that GPS collar data, showing that corridor and documenting some of that usage. We're also using trail cameras to monitor usage of these. This is one, I think, from HD Summit. See if that actually works. So we use trail cameras. Get a lot of questions about the cattle panels. If deer will actually go through those. And you can see here the does are jumping over. Right there, fawn squirted through. They tend to like to go under. And so that's, those are to prevent, cattle and other things like horses from using them. They're accessible to cattle if need be, if it's crosses a grazing allotment or they need to move their cows or whatever. We can open those up real easy, but that's to keep that corridor for the wildlife primarily. So back in 2018, there was a federal initiative, Secretarial Order 3362, signed by the Interior. That provided a framework for cooperation between local, state, and federal agencies. It provided funding and kind of a standard protocol for all the states. Each state was tasked with developing a plan to identify and prioritize migration corridors and winter ranges for big game species. We have developed 3 plans thus far, updated them, not quite annually. We're working on 2023 right now. Our first action plan basically just said, okay, where are our priorities? Which herds? What data do we have that we can map and get them up to speed using kind of some of the latest science on this. 2019, basically we're looking at crucial habitat, which habitats within the corridors, where can we implement projects. 2020, 21, identified some on-the-ground needs, fencing modifications. We also added a couple extra research projects here, including the horse mule deer competition stuff that you guys saw in May that Dr. Stoner presented on. And we're working on getting that published this year, hopefully, in peer review. And then our most recent one that we're working on, we're going to add 5 new corridors for mule deer and 3 pronghorn corridors, as well as summarizing some of the habitat successes and projects we've done within those corridors. So these were our first 3 corridors that we prioritized for mule deer. And there's actually 3 subherds, but the purple is Area 6, for those not familiar with this, but this is Elko. You have the Pequops, Ruby Mountains, and then these 3 herds within the Area 6 larger herd, which we defined as the Eisenhood Basin herd, the Sheep Creek herd, and the South Tuscarora herd. And actually, we're working on expanding that because, of course, some of these deer, that doesn't even capture all the variability. Some of these deer go up on the Wahi Desert. They migrate into Idaho on the Bruno, Jarbidge confluence and up into Wahi. So we're working to further kind of define that. And Pequot, we're expanding Pequot to include contact. And some of those deer also migrate much further north. And even the rubies, we've expanded collaring there to include a corridor between the East Humboldts and Spruce Mountain that crosses Highway 93 right here by Dry Valley Mountain. So we've been working to publish these with USGS. This was our first one, volume 1. There's an interactive map that you can access the data. You can download the data in ScienceBase. This is showing the mule deer herds, our priority mule deer herds. We added this pronghorn herd, the Sheldon. That was some work that the Sheldon actually did. And we just kind of worked with the USGS to get that remapped and published. As well as you can see, a little bit hard to read on this map, but 3 herds here right around Reno. So we've got the Truckee to Verdi, the Truckee Loyalton, we're calling it, pretty much Peterson Mountains into 021, right around Reno, and then the Carson River herd, interstate herd. So these are deer that summer in the Sierra, California. They winter in Nevada around Carson City. Some of them even go into the Pine Nut Mountains and even farther east into the Buckskin Mountains. We had a couple. So this is kind of a sneak preview. I'm not going to touch too much on this, but this is some stuff we're working on with a connectivity plan. And it's an online tool that we're working to develop. We've had a couple stakeholder meetings already. We planned some public meetings. What this is going to do is allow you or anybody to view and access this data, this corridor data. It is available already. Some of it is with USGS, but we don't have Nevada-specific layers to go with it. And so in this case, this is a tool that you can display the corridors. This is an example of the Pequops. And that underlying map is our eco-state map. I think Mark Freeze is going to talk a little bit more about some of this habitat mapping that we're doing, but essentially it allows you to evaluate what the condition of the vegetation is on the ground through time. In this case, we've got pretty good shrub integrity, a little bit of cheatgrass invasion there. The red and the brown is what you don't want to see, but this is actually really good compared to some of our other herds. There's other things about this tool. You can look at the number of fences they have to cross, the number of roads, linear miles that cross the corridor. And we'll be probably coming to you with an update on that in the future once we get this thing fully built out. So this is just kind of another way that we're looking at some of this data. The blue lines are that Area 6 deer herd. We call them the spaghetti lines. Those are just the lines connecting the dots. And the polygons are fires. So this is one of our herds that has just been, devastated by fires. This is just going back to, well, it shows back to the early 80s, really in the yellow, and then the more recent stuff in red. But really since 2017, 18 is when we've seen some of our significant fires occurring along the corridor, mostly winter range. You've got the Sheep Creek Range. Summer range has been fairly intact, although the South Sugarloaf fire, which was 2018, I believe, actually burned up into some of the summer range. Ultimately, that summer range could be beneficial, given it has a little bit higher moisture regime, and we'll see some productivity there. But that lower elevation stuff along Interstate 80 is it's a real challenge in terms of recovery and rehabilitation. I think Mark's going to chat a little bit more about that as well. You can see here in the middle, this one corridor, this is another area of concern for us. Some of these deer cross Interstate 80 right here at the Humboldt River near Dumphy. They winter in the Argenta Rim area, which has been burned, but we see a few collisions along here. Those deer are forced to go under a bridge that's full of water in high flows, and that forces them to go up and over the highway, increasing their chance of getting hit on the road. There's also some fencing issues there. We're working with some of our partners there to get some of those issues straightened out. So now I'm going to get a little bit more into just kind of trends that we're seeing. You're probably going to guess it's not a great positive picture. This is our statewide spring fawn counts going back to 75. With our mule deer population estimate, which has, as most people are aware, steadily declined since the mid-'80s. But it just closely follows that trend in that spring fawn to doe ratio. That's the point I kind of want to make with this is, if we're not recruiting fawns into the population, that population is going to continue to decline. This is on a statewide level. I don't have the most recent numbers up here. This was around 78,000. We were actually, I think, at 68 in 2023. So it's continuing on a downward slope. This is just showing that trend in fawn ratio going back to 75, but here I'm showing the spring fawn ratio in the blue, that bottom line, and the orange is the fall fawn ratios. So they closely track each other, which is not surprising because our fall fawn ratio is kind of what we consider our production. So how many fawns were born that year, how many survived through the summer. The blue is how many actually made it through the winter. So obviously less make it. But that trend, especially compared back to the early 70s when we just had real high fawn ratios coming into fall with, 60 plus fawns per 100 does. Now we're down around 50 in the fall and only about 30 in the spring. So that's not a good trend. Obviously, it's had an impact on our deer tag sales and our number of deer harvested. So the orange bar or the orange line here is just annual harvest, everything lumped together, bucks, does, specialty tags, everything, junior tags. We were issuing, I think, around 51,000 deer tags in 1988. And now we're down to, I don't even have the most recent numbers, but it was around 15,000 in 2022. We issued about just a little over 10,000 this last year in May. And so that deer harvest, projecting it out, we're probably going to be right down around here this year for tag sales and deer harvested. All right, so now I kind of want to get into what's driving this. You're going to hear me talk about this more, and you have already in the past, but sagebrush habitat and winter range is, in my view, one of the most important things. We hosted a mule deer summit in Winnemucca back in, when was that, August? And Randy Newberg was our guest speaker. He wasn't able to attend, unfortunately, but he actually asked us to provide figures or a map that showed he graduated from University of Nevada, Reno in 1988, and he wanted to know how many acres of winter range had burned since that time. So I threw this figure together, and I didn't know the numbers myself, but I calculated about 21% of mule deer winter range, this is across the whole state, has burned just since 1988. The blue polygons are winter range, and then these hashed black outlines are where the fires have burned over winter range. And then you can see kind of the trend in time here. These are bars by year. Winter range burned, total 13.9 million acres. Actually, the 13.9 is the acreage of the winter range. 2.9 million acres burned since 1988. It tends to go in these cyclical periods, and it's an increasing trend, unfortunately. Right now, we're in a downward trend. Luckily, we haven't really had major fires in the last couple of years. Certainly back in those fires I mentioned, 2016, 17, 18, burned a huge amount of acreage of winter range. Kind of more locally, just wanted to provide a local example here. The Reno area is in the Carson Range, and the surrounding mountain ranges are not immune to wildfires. So this is some stuff we put together back in 2018. We were trying to get a Sierra front, kind of a working group going. This predated the Mule Deer Enhancement Program, but this is just showing the number of fires around Reno. So yellow was 2017, which is a big year. And this map is not updated. There's been several fires, significant fires since then, particularly in the Peterson Mountain, 021 north of Reno. But many of these fires have burned winter range for mule deer, is the point that we want to make with this slide. And so kind of putting it more into quantifiable numbers here, this is, again, taking that eco-state map that Habitat has developed. So they took remote imagery, just to kind of summarize it in a nutshell. Remote imagery, you can quantify the condition of the vegetation back in time. And I just correlated this with our fawn trends in 5-year bins, basically, back to 86. So I looked at 4-year bins. The blue bars are the average statewide fawn ratios, and the green bars are the percentage of good condition shrubland. So both of those trends are downward, and they track very closely. And I just did a simple model with a program R where I calculated a correlation coefficient, looking at that percentage of shrubland condition with fawn ratios, and there's some variance there, but it's highly significant, statistically significant, and it's, like I said, it just strongly correlates with the condition of the shrubs and the habitat with our fawns. We're also trying to be proactive on the predation management side of things. This is a list of predator projects. Not all of these projects are specific to mule deer. In fact, many of them are not specific to mule deer, but we believe they may have benefits to mule deer. So some of these are targeting bighorn sheep, for instance, in 013 and 074. Project 37, big game protection, mountain lions. Most of that work is focused in Washoe County as part of the MDEP program. We have active lion removal in those units, 013, 014, 021, 022. And then as well as Project 38, which is more focused on coyotes, larger area. Those are primarily for pronghorn, but we believe they may have some benefit for mule deer as well. And those are the hunt units that Wildlife Services have worked in just in the last, this is only 22 to 23, the last fiscal year. Project 40 has been going on for a while now in the Diamond Mountains, coyote removal for mule deer protection, and then lethal removal of mountain lions in Area 24. So getting into more of the kind of the research side of things, this is some of the work we're doing through the Predator Management Program, assessing mountain lion harvest. Project 46, you've seen presentations on that from our collaborators at University of Montana, investigating potential limiting factors on mule deer. So that's the camera study in Washoe, Northwest Nevada in Washoe County, getting an estimate of mule deer numbers, but also predator numbers on the landscape. Project 47 is a new project, mule deer enhancement program. I'm not 100% sure what that one entails, but I'm sure we can get some more information from Pat on that at future meetings if you would like. Research projects, we collared about 670 mule deer since 2017. Currently monitoring about 200 GPS collars annually. Actually, that's a little higher now with the MDEP, especially the colors we're going to add this year. It'll probably be closer to 350 annually. Primarily mapping crucial habitat corridors. We're also getting information on survival rates and body condition information for the animals that we capture. Kind of want to just highlight this project that we did. We partnered with Dr. Perry Williams at University of Nevada, Reno. A few years ago, we wanted to get a handle on if we could use thermal imagery to estimate survival, so we wouldn't have to get our hands on the fawns. It's something that really hadn't been done before. We had a bunch of collars already marked, and we paid for this through the predation management funds. The thermal imagery is fairly expensive to collect. And so we started this in 2017. We just did one summer of it. We collected 3 time periods, June, July, and August. Basically, we went out and surveyed collared deer in 2 different areas. And we looked at this time series. We looked at predator control versus no predator control. And we had a total of 6 survey periods, 23 individual animals over 3 time periods, total of 69 observations. We did have 1 adult that died, so we had to remove that from the analysis. I presented this at the Wildlife Society annual conference in Reno a couple years ago. And this is the study area map. Ruby Mountains was our control, and the Diamond, since we had that ongoing coyote project here near Eureka, these are the Diamond Mountains, Ruby Mountains. This is some of the imagery that we got from that project. Hopefully it works. You're going to see, right now you can't see much, but when you turn on the infrared, you'll notice the white. That's a doe with 2 fawns. Just pops out. Now we're switching back to the color. You can see that white dot on the top of that deer. That's the collar. The top of the collar has a little GPS unit on it that's white. You can see here eating. You can actually see the collar band if you look closely on the neck. Some of the metrics here are pretty cool. Airplanes flying at 8,900 feet, the doe's at 7,000 feet. So almost 2,000 feet above in a half-mile distance. That's zoomed out right there. They just look like dots. When you zoom that camera in, you can really see that deer. So that's circling around it. So that work had not been done previously, to our knowledge. It was one of the first ones to publish. Pretty good. We were able to get survival rates, which we didn't know if we could. They were fairly high, surprisingly, but comparable with previous studies on mule deer. So we looked at comparisons with Kevin Monteith, published this work in 2014 as his PhD. He had very similar results, although he was actually capturing fawns using VITs and radio fawn collars in the Eastern Sierra. This is down by Mammoth Lakes and Bishop, California. So comparable rates, that was good. And keep in mind, that's only a 3-month period or a 3-time period in the summer months. So that's why those survival rates look pretty high. We weren't able to detect a difference between the study areas, although sample sizes were fairly low. We only had 7 individuals in the predator control area. So I provided the link here. You can download this. It's open access journal. Click on there. You can look at some of the methods, some of the other figures. These are some of the other pictures we took on those surveys. This is more recent work that we've been doing in Washoe County. So this is part of the MDEP program. We started deploying these collars. It's a little bit hard to see in this picture. I think I got a better one, but this is a solar ear tag and a traditional VHF collar. This is one of our MDEP members, Gratian Uvalde. Some of you probably know him from Ely. He's a rancher, and they developed these things for cattle. And they came to us and said, hey, we think these would work for you guys' mule deer. Do you want to try them out? So we said, sure, let's try them. We were a little nervous to just throw them out by themselves, so we doubled up. We put a tag and a collar on each individual, so we kind of compare the performance and differences of them. He came up to help us put these on. This is on the Sheldon. In December, everybody's bundled up. It was negative 12 degrees on the Sheldon. I've never seen it that cold when we did this capture. So Ed Partee, our veterinarian, Nate LaHue, these are some folks from the Sheldon that were there. This is on the Sheldon, so they gave us some of the funding for some of the collars as well. It was a cool project, and it is continuing to be a cool project. Here's a little bit better picture of that ear tag on a buck. Only 22 grams. I wish I would have brought one to show around, but they're real small, light. This is kind of just tracking the performance. So we didn't know how they would perform. It doesn't have an internal battery. It's not like a traditional collar. I mean, it has a tiny one, like a watch battery. Fixed rate is real high. So these bars are showing the number of fixes at the tag, and they're getting about 8 fixes a day, the success rate. This is fairly high. I was surprised. I thought it might be lower because this was collected over the winter. So when storms hit or they go into thick cover or something, that solar panel might not be charging up all the time. But we've had over 70% collection frequency or success rate just on these 5 tags here. And I haven't looked at it. I imagine those bars will be a little bit higher through the summer months because we just get a lot more sun, obviously, and less storms. So this is kind of a heat density map from those solar tags. This is up on the Sheldon. Each color dot is a different individual. Obviously, we caught a lot of these around Blowout Mountain here, Badger Creek. You got Bittner Meadows, Catnip Mountain, just for reference. If anybody still has a tag in 033, I think there's 2 days left. Just a little quick tip where you might go. We've also used the collars to develop some habitat projects through the mule deer enhancement. So this is collars, this is maps that John Ivanek developed for his MDEP team. This is the granites in 014 We're looking to do some habitat treatment in the rock fire. Mouse isn't working. On the left. On the right, this is Boulder Mountain. So collar data, this is collars we've just been collecting recently. A little bit hard to tell, but this is a fence spring protection project, Horse Canyon, just recently completed. I wish I had some pictures of it. I didn't get to go on it myself. I wasn't here. But I think there was a big volunteer project. I know NBU put some stuff out and really successful. And we have more projects lined up with some of this data, more spring protections and more habitat projects planned. That is all I have for now. Put my contact up there. If anybody has any questions, feel free to contact me and I'd be happy to take a few if there's time.
I guess any questions for Cody real quick before we go to the habitat side of it? You got a couple? Go ahead.
Thank you, Cody, for the presentation. Just a couple questions on the wildlife crossings, I like to say. Endel was one of the first departments to get into wildlife crossings in the Pequot, and it's been a great thing. We're seeing now way more across the West and other agencies. As to the upcoming projects, I know, and I apologize, I forget the bill number, but the wildlife crossings bill passed. And you mentioned, I think it was 5 mule deer and 3 pronghorn. Do you have some ballpark ideas of where they're going, or just we're in the process of that right now?
Yeah, good question, Commissioner Young. So, yeah, that's AB 112. We just actually had a kickoff meeting with NDOT, and they're working with a contractor. We've identified a few spots. They might not necessarily be those high quality, high resolution corridors that we're publishing on. I think one of them probably will be. So the way that we're kind of approaching that bill is we're going to put together a wish list, a big wish list, not just for mule deer, other species as well, but mule deer is going to be pretty centric on there. They're going to analyze a lot of the crash data. They're going to overlay our collar data where we have corridors mapped and kind of see what makes sense in terms of like priorities, right? And maybe kind of develop like a 5-year plan or something like that. These projects take a long time to get in the works. If you can identify them early on, especially if there's a planned NDOT project, like a highway improvement project, road straightening, anything like that, it's much easier and cheaper for NDOT to get those. But that bill is going to provide that funding from the legislature to go after federal funds as part of the matching funds. Gotcha. So yeah, I expect a few of these corridors will be included in that wish list. I can't say which ones right now because we're just we literally had a meeting on it like 2 days ago.
It's new.
It is very new.
Well, good. No, and the wildlife crossings is huge, I think, for the connectivity. My other question is on the solar ear tags. Obviously exciting. Is there a benefit, and I know we're in the early stages too on that, is there a benefit? Are they cheaper? Are they just smaller? Is there a potential there to be a benefit for us instead of the general collar?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, they're not necessarily cheaper. They're about the same, actually. A little bit cheaper on the data costs, and maybe as they get more developed, they actually will become cheaper. That's kind of the hope. More used widely. It turns out ranchers aren't using them as much, but they have a lot of potential for wildlife. There are some benefits, though. For one, you don't have the collar around their neck, so that does cause some rubbing sometimes. The weight is much lighter. And then the tricky part about these collars is putting them on an animal and getting a proper fit, especially when you're talking about an animal that may be only 6 months old, if you catch it as a fawn, because it's going to expand. Bucks are really tricky because bucks, especially mule deer, their necks expand during the rut. Huge. They'll go from a 16-inch neck to almost 40 inches. That's what Joe Zweifel told me. And so designing a collar that will actually expand that much is really challenging. And none of the collar manufacturers make one. So you put that ear tag on there, and you don't have to have a collar that accommodates that neck swell. They won't have to worry about it getting tangled when they're fighting or whatever. So there's some advantages there. They're solar powered. So in theory, they can last about 3 years. 3 to 4 years is what they're predicting and what they've seen with cattle. So there are some advantages there, and I think it's going to progress. The technology is going to get just better and better with those.
Any additional questions for Cody? And I guess I just have one comment as far as talking about the new crossings, you know, the heavy civil construction's my world. And like you said, if you guys could piggyback these on existing NDOT projects, like I think you've probably seen the cost would be the cost is substantially different than a standalone project for one of these. So I think you guys already have it in the works to try to know these locations ahead of time where NDOT could piggyback them on. It'd be giant from a cost standpoint.
For the record, Alan Janae, and that's typically, even when we're dealing with NDOT, is they'll just, while the information and the project may be identified, is they'll hold it until there's a larger project and then roll it all together.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you, Cody.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. My name is Mark Fries. I'm the Habitat Division Administrator for the record. Here just to talk briefly on the habitat side of mule deer projects. Just a quick overview, today's presentation, give a brief introduction into what habitat improvement projects are. We'll discuss the MDEP projects that are coming through the committee. Just our restoration and rehabilitation programs, where a lot of the benefits to mule deer come from. And, you know, over the last 6 years, NDOW has treated over 617,000 acres, you know, at a cost of nearly $18 million. So pretty successful there. I'll touch on some of the special reserve account heritage obligations that have been made over the years, talk briefly on water development, our other programs, and then just briefly on the sagebrush habitat plan. So just a real brief introduction. I'll fly through these pretty quickly. Just wanted to paint a picture of what we're talking about. But if you want more information, I would refer you to biologist Brittany Trimble's presentation at the August Commission meeting. She gave a nice in-depth presentation on restoration program and our partnerships. But the three big areas we work in is fire rehab and restoration, pinyon juniper removal, and spring riparian meadow enhancement type projects. So fire restoration, these are all pictures from the Martin fire. Real quick, upper left-hand corner is an herbicide treatment. It's kind of looking down a fence line there. It's a little difficult to see, but you can see where the plane flew over, sprayed it on the left. There is no cheatgrass. On the right, there is cheatgrass. You know, in the following years, we'll come in and seed that area that's been sprayed with desirable perennial species. Upper right-hand corner is a sagebrush strip that Elko NDOW office did. You can see how successful that is. Lower left-hand corner is an aerial seeding application. The bottom middle's drill seeding, and then the bottom right's desirable non-native species in a really tough site where we expected a lot of cheatgrass to come in, that we included forage kochia, a Siberian wheatgrass, also sprayed it. And if you look at the areas that were untreated on that rim country, no seed, no herbicide, they're almost purely dominated by cheatgrass. So we did some good stuff there. Next one's just pinyon juniper removal. Here's a project from Elko, Spruce Mountain. Deputy Director Caleb McAdoo was instrumental in getting this project completed, but nearly 10,000 acre treatment over a number of years using various techniques, including mastication, chaining in combination with seeding, and then some hand thinning. And then on to just an example of spring restoration. This is Porcupine Spring on the Dry Valley Rim, an area that's heavily impacted with wild horses. You can see that picture in 2015 during kind of a peak drought period. Picture on the right was 2018. So this project just had a fence installed after the summer season when there was quite a bit of grazing. You could see what it looks like there. So that picture is taken in October. And then 6 months later, 8 months later, just the improvement in condition once we relieve that grazing pressure, what these spring and riparian systems can do. So that was just a quick overview on what those projects, what they look like. I just wanted to paint a visual picture, brief overview. Now more to the numbers. So through the MDEP committee, we've are working on basically 47 different habitat projects. 47 have been submitted to date. So in 2021, 18 projects were submitted requesting nearly 1.7 million. The committee supported 9 of those at just under $1 million. 4 have been completed, 3 in progress, 2 awaiting implementation. There's 9 on the bench, and just because they're on the bench doesn't mean we're not actively pursuing those as well. 3 of those actually are in the process of moving forward with implementation. In heritage funding for those projects, we had 4 projects submitted through the Heritage and awarded through the Heritage Committee at $255,000. In 2022 projects, there were 22 projects submitted, nearly $3 million. 11 were supported, 11 were put on the bench. Of those supported, 5 are in progress, 6 are awaiting implementation. And of those on the bench, there's about 6 projects that are moving forward. And then this year we received 7 projects. Funding request is going to range from $1.6 to $1.8 million. So that's just a broad overview of the MDEP projects. In our restoration program, we do a lot. We have trouble tracking everything and telling our story with what's going through MDEP projects. So these numbers are actual accomplished numbers, lots of different sources of funding coming into play, but this is what's been implemented by our biologist over the last 6 years. So for fire rehab, we have implemented 570,000 acres at nearly $12 million cost. We're averaging about 95,000 acres of fire rehab treatments on an annual basis at about $2 million a year. Pinyon juniper removal in total over 6 years, 44,000, just under 45,000 acres, and a little over $4 million cost. We're roughly on an annual basis treating about 7,500 acres a year and spending about $700,000. And then for riparian restoration, in total, we've implemented about 1,600 acres of treatment over 6 years at about $1.7 million cost. That's nearly 150,000 linear feet of fence around some of these riparian spring areas. And this isn't your standard range fence. Most of this is going to be represented by pipe rail fence. Far more durable, minimal maintenance. It's a lot more wildlife friendly as well. And then this was a table I had at my fingertips. I just wanted to pull in just to show you guys the obligation. So it's not necessarily the dollars that have been spent. And those previous slides on fire rehab, pinyon juniper numbers, so the mule deer enhancement projects are nested within those. And these dollars are being used in those, represented in those as well. But I wanted to share, habitat conservation fee over the last 10 years has spent nearly 5.6, or obligated nearly $5.6 million. Heritage is obligated nearly $11.5 million. Upland Game Bird Stamp is obligated nearly $3 million. Doug Stamp almost $1.2 million, for a grand total of over $21 million. So it's pretty impressive, those programs and the obligations that have been made. After watching Staff Specialist Schroeder's presentation, I figured out I forgot some stuff. So NGO donations are huge. I would estimate over the past 5 years for our restoration program, we've received between $1.5 million and $2 million. NBU alone has contributed over $750,000 in the past 5 years to fire rehab. So there's significant pieces missing here. Another one that's missing is Nevada Dream Tag. Nevada Dream Tag has consistently provided about $250,000 a year. So that's, almost $1.5 million over the last 6 years from Nevada Dream Tag. And then another piece that's missing up here is assistance agreement, partnership dollars. So we work with BLM, Forest Service, NRCS, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Navy, and we set up agreements with them. They recognize our ability and flexibility in contracting, getting project work done. So they're constantly asking us to accept some of their funding and work with them to implement projects. Right now, I think we have about $10 million of assistance agreement money on the books, with potential for another 5 to 10 million available in each one of those agreements. So that's a significant portion. Money generally hasn't been our problem recently. It's our capacity. We've got about 6 full-time equivalent biologists on the ground that do all this work. And that's our biggest challenge, getting these projects implemented, contract, follow through, PIing. It's a lot of work, and our biologists have been very successful, but our limiting factor to getting more done is certainly our capacity at the moment. So moving on from our restoration program onto water development, just quickly, we have about 1,775 water developments in the state, of which about 474 of those are big game. If we estimated the cost of installing those 474 today, it would be almost $36 million. So significant investment have been made in water developments over the years. Director Janae, Deputy Director Scott certainly had big role in those over the years. It's a program we're very passionate about. But these certainly provide critical water sources for mule deer and a lot of other wildlife across the landscape. But we can't say exactly how many are just for mule deer because it's benefiting all species. But a large majority of those are certainly benefiting mule deer. And just to back up one step on the restoration program, so all those restoration projects, the 618,000 acres, not all of them are benefiting mule deer, but I'd say the vast majority, over 80% of those, certainly do benefit mule deer. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of our other habitat programs. Technical review is a huge one. Now, it's difficult to quantify exactly what the benefits are to mule deer. I know Jasmine Kleiber can certainly talk about, how many projects we review on an annual basis. A lot of times it's 400-600 annually. But these efforts are significant when we talk about avoiding, mitigating, and minimizing impacts to mule deer. It's just really difficult to measure and say what those benefits directly are to mule deer. But that program also generates some of the funding we use in restoration through those mitigation funds. Industrial development programs, another one that is preventing losses from mule deer, fencing around cyanide ponds, working with the industry to minimize those impacts. And then we have a private lands program. It's really not a formalized program, but we do a lot of work on private lands, so some of the recent conservation easements, acquisitions, we provide technical advising, project implementation on private lands, certainly benefit mule deer as well. And we also have the Wildlife Management Area Program, which do projects for mule deer to a limited degree. It's a lot more targeted for waterfowl, but there are benefits there as well. And then just want to touch on the Sagebrush Habitat Plan and Connectivity Plan. We are working closely with game on these. It's in development. We've had some recent meetings, got some traction. We hope to be able to share that with you guys in the near future. But really the goal of this is to provide managers and decision makers with a prioritization tool, help us be more strategic with where we're directing conservation efforts, really focused on the protect, grow, and connect core concepts, which is being widely accepted at this time. Hopefully we can be more effective with where we're prioritizing and targeting treatments. With that, I'll happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Young?
Thank you, Mark. I apologize for all the questions this morning. You made a comment on kind of limiting factors, and I'm on the Mule Deer Enhancement Committee as well. And it's kind of lack of staff. And would you say to able, because what we're dealing with, and I'm not a biologist, but is the wildfires, last 20 years have been excessive in the state, and trying to catch up, especially on the winter ranges. And with these projects that you guys do a great job putting together, if it's PJ removal or if it's restoration, what have you, would you feel like the two limiting factors might be is kind of funding, even though we have probably some of the best sportsmen and NGO groups across the West? Would you say more funding, streamlining to get those projects? Because on the enhancement committee, I think one thing is you guys do have difficulties going out and kind of rounding up funding for some of these projects. Would you think more funding / more kind of manpower would help?
Thanks for the question. More money at this time, I don't think's the fix. There's been a lot of money coming through federal agencies, through the bill funding, IRA funding, and so that's not the problem. That may be an issue in 3-5 years. But capacity is truly our issue. The people to go out, design the project, work with partners, contract it, PI it, like go through all the process. 6 full-time equivalent biologists isn't much. I think I estimated each biologist is carrying out 20 to 25,000 acres a year based on those numbers. That's significant. I think folks are punching above their weight, and we're asking a lot of them, and they're continuing to do that. But capacity is the biggest issue at the moment. The next potential issue is NEPA. There's areas where we can't implement projects because there isn't NEPA completed. We're always working with federal partners to get that NEPA across the line and going to areas where we know they're going to get the projects completed or NEPA is completed.
Any additional questions? Commissioner McNitch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just a comment. When we're talking about the mule deer stuff, there's a lot of narratives around the whole process and the whole the projects and stuff. And I hope that you guys are able to that we find a way to get you guys out in front like you have been this morning and talk about your projects and talk about the activities. And I get it. I get that there's a lot of different things impacting mule deer, but these projects they're pretty cool. The ear tags and tracking the deer, and for a long time we've talked about the overpasses. Well, there's a lot of other things going on too. I mean, you can, the spring work and the reseeding after fires and rehabbing and stuff. And there's just a lot more going on. And I appreciate the studies that are being done. I hope we can turn our attention to those areas that are going to get us a big bang for the buck. And didn't mean to do a pun there, but anyway, I hope we can hear more about what you guys are doing. The projects with the mule deer and the collaring and stuff. We just don't get to hear a lot about them. They're pretty interesting, and I know there's a lot of science behind them, but they're pretty cool.
All right. Director Janae.
Yeah, for the record, Alan Janae. And so I think, this is a recent glimpse. Mark has given you a recent glimpse. In 2018, I pulled this together, looking back at what NDOW had done for sagebrush. And at that time, from 1998, when basically the Heritage Funds became available, when that program was created, till 2018, NDOW and the commission had committed over $25 million during that period. So you look at what this is doing. We're definitely ramping up. We're getting more work done. But there's been a long-term commitment by NDOW and by the commission to doing this work. I think some of the tools that you're seeing here hit backwards once. This is, while this is a very simple map right here, the information that's contained in it is amazing. It really is going to provide a great assistance to our biologists and to hopefully other land managers here in the state, as this eco-state information, not only does it tell us, the loss that has occurred since 1986, we've got this data set you can see there in the colorations of it. It totally jives with what Cody's seeing and those studies that we're looking at is we've lost 50% of our sagebrush habitats in this state. A very significant portion of it is winter range. And when you start contemplating the plight of our mule deer herds, they're tracking one another. Sage grouse are right there with it. Other sagebrush obligates are also with it. And so it's no new news that's occurring, but one of the things we'll be coming back to you is with this sagebrush habitat, it's going to be a mapping viewer. I don't know what the fancy name that we're going to call it. But we'll be able to absolutely take this down to a more localized level to help contemplate this, protect the core and be able to come up with prescriptions that are much more nuanced and a little bit finer scale. Just because it takes we've got if you've seen the WAFWA maps, they're kind of the blue maps, big blue blobs depicting priority, but this goes to a different level by going through the different condition states, and it helps, and it'll serve as a very good tool for managers, but we'll bring that back to you in the future because I think it's one of the bigger advances. While you can go out on the ground, and see these things in the messaging and trying to convey to the public, convey to the legislature what the heck's occurring in this state. I think this is a great tool. So we'll get it back to you. I think we're anticipating, early in the new year we'll have a public viewer up. So anyway, other things, as long as we're talking, I did want to give an update on capacity. We are working. It's always a problem for the department to try to find employees, to get through the legislative process, to actually get employees, and to get a permanent employee. But we are working with partners, and we have in the past, Pheasants Forever. We are working on some capacity positions there where we can bring them on to help, do more work on the ground and on the landscape. And the other upside I would say that Mark mentioned was the BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, and the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act funds are coming through the federal government. And I mean, they are bringing a significant amount of money to do on-the-ground projects, from BLM to Forest Service to NRCS, and all of them are bringing more capacity and more funding. So I think for probably the next 3 to 5 years, as Mark mentioned, we're going to see a bump in activity by the federal agencies, both in cooperation with us, but also in their own actions. And I think it's perfect timing that this map is going to be done and available to help drive those discussions around those projects and target them appropriately. But it isn't all doom and gloom. It is pretty depressing when you sit there and you contemplate the plight of our mule deer herd. But I think we've probably never seen the commitment. Well, I can say that. In my career, I've never seen the commitment and the amount of funding that's going to hit the ground in the next 5 years. So it is pretty drastic when you look at it, but there's an upside. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you for bringing this to us today. Like Commissioner McNitch said, I think this is beneficial, like reviewing these the project updates for the commission, for the CABs, and for the public. So I do appreciate it. So thank you on that. With that, we will go to agenda item number 18, Commission General Regulations Workshop for possible action. 18A, Commission Regulation 500, Subdivision Map Review, Wildlife Staff Specialist Jasmine Kleber, The commission will hold a second workshop to consider amending the Nevada Administrative Code 278 to provide the department review of tentative subdivision maps and inclusion of recommendations for methods to avoid or minimize impacts to wildlife, mitigation measures, best management practices, or required design features, and provide for collection of associated fees to the department for carrying out such reviews.
Good morning, and thank you. I don't see the remote up here, so I'm not sure how to move my slides forward, but Jasmine Kleiber, Wildlife Staff Specialist in the Habitat Division. I oversee the technical review program at the department, for the record. So I'd like to thank you all again for entertaining this as a second time to review the proposed regulation for subdivision map review. The last time we visited this topic was exactly a year ago, and there hasn't been a lot of momentum on it since then, for obvious reasons with the provisions set forth by the governor's office on regulations. So I'm happy to see that we're able to pursue this a little bit more. We've been reinitiating a lot of discussions with different interested parties at this time. And so it is our hope that the commission can review the proposed regulation and provide any feedback, edits on this. I would like to add that in the reinitiation of this proposed regulation, we are currently planning a public workshop. That workshop is more like an open house style forum that is anticipated to be held the week after Thanksgiving. During that, the members of the public, as well as local and regional government planning bodies, and the regional builders associations, among others, will be invited to participate in discussions, raise concerns, provide recommendations, and I will be giving this presentation at that open house as well. So during the 2021 legislative session, Assembly Bill 211 was introduced and passed. That bill amended Nevada Revised Statute 278. That's an act relating to land use planning and specifically the review of tentative subdivision maps. What that bill did was include the Department of Wildlife as one of the agencies that would receive opportunity to review subdivision maps. So they are included in the list of those who would get maps from the planning bodies. It also established a new statute under NRS 278 .337, granting the commission the ability to establish regulations for how the department were to conduct review of those subdivision maps. Under the proposed regulations, they specifically, as I mentioned, relate to land use planning and the review of subdivision maps. They currently were offering definition and interpretation of several terms that relate to that review. The definitions are definitions that currently exist under NRS 278. We're simply acknowledging them and indicating that the department would be utilizing those definitions as already outlined. The interpretations are specific to terms that are used in Assembly Bill 211 that are not defined in statute anywhere. And so where where interpretation is offered in the proposed regulation, it would be specific to use under the regulation for department review. It is not intended that those interpretations be utilized by other government agencies or others reviewing the subdivision maps, but specifically for department review. The proposed regulation also sets forth requirements for certain pieces of information that will aid the department in our review of those subdivision maps. Currently, under Nevada Revised Statute, there is an itemized list of items that would be provided by developers with subdivision maps. But the pieces of information that are contained in there are really specific toward municipal planning, such as effluent needs. And those are just not relevant to wildlife review. So under the proposed regulation, we have a list of information that we would like to receive from developers that will aid in our review. The proposed regulations also provide that the department will provide written comments on a tentative map. And that will aid both in the planners and the decision makers, but also aid in the developers better understanding feedback from the department and having a copy of that for permitting records and other needs. And then, under the proposed regulations, we're establishing certain fees for the review of the tentative map. I would like to point out the fees are established already under Nevada Revised Statutes 278. However, we're simply accounting for provisions on how those fees are to be paid and at what point, as well as accounting for any additional review that may be needed on a tentative map should modifications be needed. So as I mentioned, under the proposed regulations, we have definitions, interpretations, and then requirements of developers. These items can be found in sections 1 through 6. Under the definitions, we have outlined the definition of subdivision and tentative map. Both of those terms currently have definitions ascribed to them under Nevada Revised Statutes. We're simply calling out which statute that is, and that those are the statutes and the definitions that we will be looking toward complying with and not offering any new definition or interpretation on those terms. For the interpretations, there are 3 terms that are utilized in the Assembly Bill 211 that do not have definitions ascribed to them anywhere in statute or other regulation in this state. And those include infill development, substantially vacant, and vacant. The department worked very closely with the Legislative Counsel Bureau when reviewing these terms and trying to determine appropriate interpretation, and so we offer those interpretations in the proposed regulation for specific use by the department as we move forward and review and what would apply. Those 3 terms really are specific to what triggers a developer needing to provide a subdivision map for review to the department. Under the requirements for the developers, the department is asking that a developer submit the following information specifically for wildlife review. And that would include topographic features on the tentative map. It would also include location relative to nearest major highways or cities, cross streets or other landmarks. In addition, we're asking that the timeline of the development be included so that the department better understands how long the development is intended to be under construction. This has come into play several times where developments are utilizing phased approaches and have multiple phases associated with them that we may not otherwise be aware of if we simply receive a map that shows all of the intended subdivision lots. And so it helps us better understand what resources may be affected and when and what time of year those resources may be affected so that we can better provide feedback on avoiding or minimizing impacts during certain seasons or over a longer period of time. We're asking that the size of the development in acres be outlined up front. And that's because some of the subdivision maps we've received to date, it's like finding Where's Waldo in where the number of acres is depicted on that map plat. Sometimes it's very easily identifiable, and sometimes it's tiny script in like 0.6 font somewhere in a lower corner. So we're just asking that the information be readily available and upfront. In addition to the size, we're asking for the type of water system that they intend to use and where that water is coming from. That does seem to be a challenge sometimes when we're not understanding if a development is tying into the regional water that's available, say through Truckee Meadows Water Authority, or if it's utilizing county systems, whether they're intending to utilize wells, and where that water is coming from. And that has potential to affect water that's available to our wildlife across the state. So we're asking for that to be identified. In addition, we're asking for the 100-year floodplain, and we would like that in the public land survey system, the section township range, so that again, like the topo features and the nearest city, major highways, et cetera, we can really hone in on where the location of the subdivision is. That has been a little bit of a challenge in some of the maps we've reviewed as well. It's hard to identify exactly where on the landscape the project is occurring. And then basic information such as contact information so that we can work directly with the developers should we have any feedback that we would like to discuss with them. And the master plan indicating future development as well. That's often not part of phased approaches, but as we know in some of our larger municipal areas, master plans are very important and multiple developers can be working within those. And so we would like to know how this all fits together. And then the fee. The fee would be a requirement as well. Under sections 7 and 8, we have outlined requirements on the department as well as that fee structure. The department will be obligated now to, under the proposed regulation, to provide written notification if anything's missing from a developer's submission. The department would also be providing written recommendations on the different methods that we would recommend for avoiding or minimizing impacts to wildlife. And where appropriate, we would also be in writing providing our recommendations on what mitigation might be suitable. I will add that mitigation is not required ever. However, we will still speak to it in hopes that where there are residual impacts that cannot be avoided or minimized, there may be opportunity to offset those impacts in some way. Within our recommendations, we'll include best management practices and/or design features. Those are intended to help illustrate more clearly what avoidance and minimization measures can be employed to help reduce those impacts to wildlife. And we'll be including those in our recommendations in writing. And where appropriate, we will also issue a written statement where we think there are no concerns or significant concerns or impacts from a project based on location. And so in addition to providing recommendations, we may simply say we don't have any concern, but we would do so in writing. As part of the proposed regulations, the department will be developing, and we have developed roughly, a single-page subdivision review form. That is where all of the requirements that a developer would be required to submit, that's where all of those pieces of information would be included. But the requirement to develop that form is on us. And it would be a publicly available form, available on our website to anybody who needs it. Now, regarding the fees, as I mentioned, these are outlined already under statute and were described in Assembly Bill 211 in more detail as to what the fees would be. Under the proposed regulation, for initial review of a tentative map, the department is proposing under these regulations that there be the $250 flat fee per project or per map with an additional fee of $5 per acre. And that's part of why we're asking for acreage to be accounted for up front as well, so that we understand how much the fee will be very clearly. We understand that these are tentative maps and they may change. And so working with the Legislative Council Bureau, we also identified that should there be changes to a map that include new information that has not previously been reviewed by the department, that $5 fee would apply to new acreage as well. That would not be duplicative for the acres that have already been reviewed. Those are already covered under their initial fee, and so it would not apply to those. That another fee would not be required. So as I mentioned, we will be holding a public workshop at the end of this month. The fees have come up numerous times, both at the county advisory boards as well as the Nevada Association of Counties and the Builders Association, and among other things. But there have been considerable discussion around the fees, and so we're anticipating more discussion around that as well at those meetings. But I would like to point out again, this was developed in coordination with LCB and approved by them as appropriate. And also per Dag Burkett's opinion that he issued after our November meeting last year in 2020, Nevada Revised Statutes 278.337 allows commission the ability to ascribe fees in this way under regulation. So with that, I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions you guys might have on the proposed regulations at this time.
All right, any questions? I have one, Jasmine, right off the bat. You just mentioned that, so on a modification, when they submit a modification, that $5 intended for any additional acreage not. So say we submit on 100 acres the first time, they submit on 105 the second, that additional fee is only for the additional 5 acres?
That's correct.
Okay, because when I read this too, I don't believe that's clear, so I would think that needs to be, we need clarification there, but. Commissioner Walter.
Clarification on that section, and then this may be more of a question with just looking at, the statute, I read the statute as allowing this body to do exactly what this reg does, but my question is, so we get a situation where the department is providing, written notification that, hey, this application's not complete, we need whatever's missing, right? And you have a statute that triggers staff's 15 days to respond based solely on the submission of a tentative map. So, I just think that could put the department in a sticky situation where we have a quote-unquote incomplete application, but the tentative map itself was complete. And I'm just wondering what the DAG's opinion may be on those situations when the department can't fully issue its comment within 15 days because the information's not available, but your developer's going to be arguing, well, we submitted the tentative map. And so I think that just puts the department in a potentially sticky area with developers that may intentionally or unintentionally create those situations. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Deputy Attorney General Greg Ott, no worries. As you can see, I'm not Deputy Attorney General Burkett, so I don't have the familiarity. My initial read of the statute is that you got to, like you said, file the comments within the 15 days, but not having the depth of Mr. Burkett, I'd like to take that down for further discussion. I know this is only a workshop, so this is going to be working its way through the process for a while. So I'm going to make a note and confer with him to follow up on that.
Thank you.
Additional. Commissioner McNitch.
Poor Jasmine, she's been expecting this. So I'm the guy that hangs on every word. I have I have an attorney friend that made a comment, if you like the law or hot dogs, you don't want to know how either one of them is made. And this is the beginning of those process with the legislative stuff, but writing these things is not an easy task, and you've got everybody wanting their stuff put in or taken out. So I really appreciate the time and effort that the agency goes through to do any regulation. These new ones are really difficult. It's not habitatness per se. It's not the stuff that the department is typically works on. I mean, it's important and it's got a reason for being here. But when you start messing with tentative maps and subdivisions and stuff, the language, it's not easy. So I appreciate the work. I think it's in pretty good shape, to be honest with you. I do have a couple of questions and a couple of suggestions. First, on the fees, I've seen fees for tentative maps and for subdivisions from certain agencies, they're astronomical. So the fee that the statutes allowed us to take up to a certain max, which is what's being proposed, this fee is not much compared to the other fees. So I think the legislature, you're bordering on an unfunded mandate here, to be quite honest with you. So I think the fee is very reasonable for the for what's being done, and I think it's a fair. So I understand everything costs money. I understand keeping costs down, but in the overall scheme of things, this fee won't add up to much compared to the other fees that are going to be paid for other reviews and other entities.
If I could speak to that,
Yeah,
if
would
you would like.
please?
Since Assembly Bill 211 was passed, the department has reviewed 54 individual subdivision tentative maps, and the average acreage among those 54 has been about 112 acres per subdivision. And with the $200.50 fee and $5 per acre, that works out to be about $810.
Yeah, and do you have any idea how much some of those are being charged from other entities? I mean, It's not even tens of thousands. It may not even be hundreds of thousands. I mean, it's substantial. So this is really a drop in the bucket. So, you know, recognizing that, you know, I complain about my $5 increase on my cable bill every time I get it, every January. I get it, and it is what it is. So I think it's pretty reasonable. In section 5, I better put my glasses on. Where you're talking, you're defining the interpretation for infill development. Would the underutilized tracks, is it, I mean, because it's not defined either, and there's not much of an interpretation for that. Is that going to get us in trouble, or are you feeling pretty comfortable there, that term?
In general, you're correct. There is no, Jasmine Kleiber for the record, there is no definition for infill tract or infill development or underutilized tract. And as we move down, as we were developing this, we tried to work with LCB on some kind of numeric that might help illustrate what underutilized might mean. And ultimately, we determined that that 75% vacancy is what we would land on, and that's more specific to vacant land. Underutilized tracts, in our mind, would be something that development had already started, and for whatever reason, there was a pause. We see that a lot in subdivision development where a phase is just not fully built out. And those aren't the things that we're typically trying to capture here. What we're really trying to capture with the interpretations of infill, substantially vacant, and vacant are those types of areas like the 12th Street Ponds in Elko that were surrounded either by railroad, by transportation infrastructure with the bridge, or new apartment buildings, but those areas had high value for wildlife, both for public access as well as for wildlife habitat. Those are the areas that we really want to hone in on being able to provide feedback on, and not so much those areas that have either experienced some level of development already or grading, for example, but simply were never finished.
Okay, so you're comfortable, you've had those conversations, and, because sometimes those things can trip things up. I mean, you know,
Right.
people make an argument, these are underutilized or not underutilized, and, you know, if you've got a feel for where you want to land on that, then that's good for me. Under number 3, where you're defining vacant, vacant to mean a subdivision of land in which the land, A, is not occupied or used, makes total sense. B and C almost seem to bump heads to me a little bit. Has not been developed or disturbed, and, so now we're adding to it, it's not an or, but it's an and. Does not have any forage, cover, nesting habitat, so we're saying has not been developed or disturbed, but then on the other hand, you know, does not have any forage, so disturbed and on one side, we're saying it's not disturbed. On the other hand, we're saying does not have any forage, which implies that it has been disturbed. Do those work together? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so Jasmine Kleiber, again, for the record, they appear to be somewhat contradictory, correct?
I think, yeah.
Right.
I mean, the disturbed, it almost implies that some of the items in C exist.
Yeah, I think we can work to clarify that. The intent here, again, is like I mentioned with the example of 12th Street Ponds, and we have examples here in Reno as well, Washoe County and other places where an area hasn't been developed in the sense of a residential development, but it's been developed for a small corner lot park, and there have trees and vegetations and a park bench, and then there are casinos on either side of it. So development, again, is that key term in our mind and what constitutes development. But ultimately, we're not trying to be contradictory, and I think some clarification would be needed on B and C in that interpretation.
Okay. It probably just is some wordsmithing is all it is, so. Under section 6, and I think this is my last one, and then I had a couple of suggestions, but where a developer shall submit to the Department of Wildlife for review in printed or electronic form, and if you go straight to C, the fee required pursuant to section 8 of this regulation. So the the requirement, we're asking them to submit the fee for review in printed or electronic form. You see what I'm saying? I know that we're after the payment of the fee is what we're after. So I don't know if that fits under Section 6, you know, because we're asking them for the tentative map and we're asking for the review form in written or in printed or electronic form, but the fee, the payment of the fee may not be. So I don't know if that's something that they can be pulled out and done in its own section, or if you know, you see what I'm saying there. 'Cause
Yes,
somebody could just print you a, you know, hey, you know, the fee was $800, so they just send you in printed or electronic form $800 on a piece of paper, and technically they're in compliance with what it's asking. So, okay. So my last thing was these plans that are coming in. I mentioned last time we looked at these, the concept of a quick start, and some of the agencies that I used to work with had these quick start processes, because one of the complaints is and probably will continue to be that it's just another layer of bureaucracy. That's what I always heard. And so some of the agencies around town, when it comes to just regular plan reviews, would do these things called quick starts. And they would allow a person submitting a tentative map, in this case, or a subdivision map, to just come in early, not part of that actual submission of a tentative map, to come in early and do their business beforehand in order to get started. And I think it's worth looking into because you don't have requirements that they have to meet. You know, we're doing suggestions and recommendations to minimize or impact the wildlife. So it might, and those other entities charge kind of a premium fee for that. You're buying time ahead of time, and it kind of does away with the whole conversation. It's so you're pulling people off to take care of that stuff up front, and they charge a little bit of a premium fee, like I said, but it's discretionary money. It's not a requirement, and if they want to do it, they do it, and it takes a little bit of that argument off the table about the cost. Some of these folks will pay that money to do that. They appreciate the opportunity to get in and get something marked off their list. So I throw that out there as a possibility. And then ultimately, since these are recommendations and suggestions, maybe there's some kind of because it's important. I mean, you're messing with subdivisions in the middle of migration corridor or something. Maybe there's some kind of a recognition program or some kind of a certification program the department could have that says, hey, you've met our suggestions and our recommendations to become as friendly a wildlife subdivision as you can be. So we're going to recognize that, and maybe that's a selling point for them. Maybe it takes the edge off of some of this. Maybe that in and of itself has value. So it adds value to the review process. You see where I'm headed with that? I'm just throwing that out there because, I mean, that's the way that it is these days. People, sometimes it's a pull. Somebody's like, hey, these guys are wildlife friendly. I'm going to go live there. I don't know. So anyway, otherwise, good job. Thank you.
Thank you, and Jasmine Kleiber again for the record. I would like to point out, Commissioner McNinch, that under Section 6, Item 4, we do have a provision in the regulations for a developer to submit the tentative maps to the department prior to submitting to their local regional planning boards or entities. And we see this work phenomenally well with energy development at this time. We do have an energy review program, and we often have developers come to us well on the front end before they even go to the federal agencies, just so that they can communicate and coordinate with us on identify any potential concerns on the front end.
And that's where I'd made my note. I guess I was after the premium fee type of concept is kind of what I'm. So I didn't. I guess I talked a little too much about the actual process, but where I was headed more, I think, was that premium fee because, I mean, everybody does it. It's discretionary. They don't have to do it. And You know, how you do it with the NRS block on it, I don't know. Maybe that's a cap, but I just throwing that out there.
I guess the kind of follow up on Commissioner McNitch, the fees to me, I live in the world of moving dirt in Southern Nevada. These fees are nothing compared to other permits we pay for. This is, like Dave said, this is an absolute drop in the bucket. So this is nothing. I see no issues at all with the fee. The one question I do have, Jasmine, I'm looking at, I don't have all the NRS in front of me, but looking back on some of what was provided, I'm curious, is it the responsibility of the planning commission or the county clerk to send this information to the department, or is the burden on the developer to send it to the department? Because some of what's, looking back here, some of the support information, it looks like NRS 278335, you know, when I'm reading that, it says it's a copy of the tentative, and I'm not going to read it verbatim, but it's supposed to be forwarded to the planning commission or its designated representative or the clerk or whatever. But then it almost, the way I'm reading this is it's like they are responsible to forward it to the Division of Water Resources, the Division of Health, the Public Utilities Commission, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just curious, the way we have it, the way the proposed language is it's the developers to send it directly to the department. And then looking back here, I read it a little different, but I'm not a lawyer either, so.
So, Jasmine Cliver, for the record, this issue was directly issued opinion by Dag Burkett, and the emails dated Thursday, January 12th. I happen to have it with me if you guys would like me to read from that and where his opinion landed with that. He did consult with LCB on this as well, but this question specifically came up several times with county advisory boards as well as NACO. And I'm happy to read that, or I'm happy to provide this as well if you guys would like to just review it separately.
And I vaguely remember this coming up before. It was just a year ago, and it's gone out of my memory bank now. But all right, if you could just summarize it, maybe.
I can summarize, yes. So Dag Burkett issued opinion that the new statute added that was as amended under NRS 278, and so 278.337 grants the Board of Wildlife Commissioners the authority to issue regulations and contradict 335. And so we are able to adopt regulations, you are able to adopt regulations that allow us the ability to require that of a developer rather than just the county board or other authorizing entity.
Okay. That's all I had. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Director Janae?
Just quickly, I wanted to note, we did receive 2 letters on this. One was from NACO, and we just, as of this morning, received another. And so we will review that correspondence and consider that before coming back to the commission.
Okay.
I do have one more. So on the NRS stuff, on the actual bill itself, if you go to page, page 4, towards the bottom, section 2.5, I'll give you a second to get there. And this might be the question for our DAG here. So in the rest of this, at the beginning of the bill, it's talking about section 1.2, chapter 278 of NRS is hereby amended. Okay, and then it goes for 2 or 3 pages on the amendments to NRS 278. When you get back to 2.5, it talks about NRS 501.356, which is starting to get into our wildlife stuff. And it talks about money received by the department from, A, the sale of licenses, and B, fees described in section 1.2 of this act. Those are separate. Those are, see, if it's going to be amended to read fees described in section 1.2 of this act, they're going to be, once everything's done, 501 is going to be over here and 278 is going to be over here. And in 501, I don't know if this is common for LCB stuff, or if it stays like this, it's going to be a problem, because it's referencing 1.2 of this act, and the act is actually something different. Do you see where I'm headed with that?
Deputy Attorney General Greg Ott, I think what you're getting at is the reference of 1.2 is actually going to end up in section 278
That's
of
right.
NRS. And so 501 will basically then include a link. It says, hey, fees collected pursuant to section 278, 337, or whatever the citation ends up being. So
Will they fix that to say that? Because if you don't, it just says fees described in section 1.2 of this act, we'll never know what act you're referring to.
correct. Once they get to incorporate all the statutes into the NRS and they get in the correct sections, they will change section 1.2 for the NRS statute where it actually
Okay.
sits.
They'll
So
fix that.
it'll make more sense than it does now.
We can be confident of that, because otherwise we have something stuck in our NRS for our wildlife stuff that dead ends right there.
Correct. They just leave it in there like that because they don't know where the statutes are going to land when LCB gets done
Okay.
putting all the statutes into the revised statutes.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Any additional questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I will take it out for cab comment. Any cab comment in Reno? Seeing none, any cab comment on Zoom?
Yeah, this is Paul Dixon, Clark Cab. One of the questions that our cab had is that since the requirements of doing the review are there, but they don't have to follow any of the recommendations, there's nothing binding in the recommendations from NDOW. Where does this play when you come to sensitive species in an area? Does that become a requirement or not, was a question that was asked. And the other part is that by just giving written comments to the developer, when most of these subdivision map reviews go before county commissions, if you don't have live testimony, they don't tend to respect written testimony as much as they do live testimony. And I wondered if NDOW ever did live testimony at a county commission meeting on a subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Any additional cab comment? Okay. Any public comment in Reno? Okay. Any public comment on Zoom? Okay.
Go ahead, Karen.
Oh, thank you. This is Karen Taylor, Washoe County resident. And I'm just thrilled that the Department of Wildlife and the Board of Wildlife Commissioners is able to weigh in on wildlife and development. This is something that some of us have been very concerned about for past 3 decades now, including going to public planning commission meetings and Washoe County meetings and asking, well, have you contacted a wildlife biologist about how this will affect wildlife? And just getting blank stares, sneers, snickers, et cetera. So it's quite a great evolution for someone like me that's been in Nevada most of my life. Thank you. Thank you for all the work that's going into this. And I'm so glad that sportsmen and biologists are going to be able to weigh in on this. Complaints about fees is, for someone like me, absolutely ridiculous. They're from people who are used to a cheap ride in Nevada. And too much is at stake here. Our lands and our wildlife are at stake. So thank you very much and keep up the good work.
Additional public comment?
Yes, good morning, Chair and members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Jennifer Berthiaume. I'm the Government Affairs Manager at the Nevada Association of Counties. When this regulation was originally proposed, NACO shared similar concerns and appreciates the time that the Chair took to meet with us and listen to those concerns. However, we feel the proposal before the board today still does not address those concerns and appears to go beyond the scope and intent of the legislation passed in 2021. As you're aware, and you mentioned, NACO submitted a letter on this matter, and I just want to quickly highlight our concerns on the proposed regulations associated with AB 211 from the 2021 legislative session. The proposed regulations appear to go beyond the parameters set forth in the following ways. by allowing the Nevada Department of Wildlife NDOW to review infill development if there is any wildlife value, regardless of surrounding development, requiring a developer, not the local government, to submit maps with required items directly to NDOW within 5 days after submitting to a county, and finally, by going directly to the maximum map review fee of $5 per acre and imposing additional fees to review modifications. NACO encourages this board to review the language and intent of AB 211 when considering these regulations and the potential impact they could have on development in our state. Thank you for your time and consideration, and we look forward to the upcoming public workshop.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? No. All right, with that, I will bring it back to the commission. Any additional questions for Jasmine? And you briefly mentioned it, Jasmine, just for clarity. NDOW, we can make recommendations on private land and private development. They can take those recommendations, or they can just throw them in the trash and kind of proceed with how they see fit and how they get their plans approved, for the most part.
Yeah, Jasmine Kleiber, for the record. Yeah, that's correct. What we're providing from the department is nothing more than recommendation. Now, what the authorizing entity chooses to do with that information is up to them. And so in some cases, there have been instances where the city of Reno has required additional action by a developer, but that's not Department of Wildlife. Department of Wildlife has no authority to do that.
All right, any additional questions or comments? Or, I mean, this is a workshop. We don't have to take any action at all. I would be super curious to hear about your public, your meeting. And then we obviously have the opportunity to look at this again. And I think you've heard kind of some of our comments on some of the language. I don't believe we need to make a motion. No, I think we're good, so. All right. Thank you, Jasmine. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we will come back and keep going. All right, we'll get going again. Go to agenda item number 18B. It's a workshop. So Commission General Regulation 511, Wildlife Management Area Regulations, Habitat Division Administrator Mark Fries. The commission will hold a second workshop to consider amending Chapter 504 of the Nevada Administrative Code. This regulation would update wildlife management area designations and restrictions.
Good morning. Mark Fries, Habitat Division Administrator for the record. So this NEC 504 regulation update deals with our wildlife management areas. Just to summarize, the commission recently designated the Argenta Wildlife Management Area and Pole Canyon Cooperative Wildlife Management Area. Additionally, the department will be incorporating the Blue Diamond properties into the Steptoe WMA. Restrictions on the use of firearms and ammunition, campfires, camping, blinds, trapping, access, guiding, and predator hunting are recommended by the department, with some items stipulated as part of the Pole Canyon access easement. In order to regulate and enforce access easement stipulations and department recommendations, the commission must modify and update WMA regulation NEC 504. And I'm happy to walk through the updated changes from the last version. I will tell you up front, I don't think we're there yet. I think we're probably 80% there. Reading Clark, White Pine County CAB minutes, it looks like we have further clarification to go. I also have to apologize. I haven't given our law enforcement enough time to review. And so I expect the next version we bring forward will be a lot closer to the final version. With that, I'm happy to walk through these. Some of the bigger changes at a last commission meeting was discussion on the Blue Diamond properties, which we're absorbing into Steptoe WMA, separating those out between mountain and meadow units. We do have a map kind of showing, demonstrating what that proposal is going to look like. We don't have final maps. We still have several of the parcels pending acquisition. We expect those some point soon. But once those other properties become NDOW properties, we'll provide finalized maps. They will be updated on the website. We'll have signage at the campgrounds, all those areas as well. So with that, I'll just jump in under NAC 504-135, restrictions on the use of firearm and ammunition. Under item 1, we added Argenta in Lander County. Under item 2, also added Argenta. Item 2B, we struck bows and arrows because they are not considered firearms, so it's a little bit out of place. And then we proposed striking item 3 altogether. There are federal regulations, which basically the requirements for waterfowl hunting. So it's a little duplicative here, and we took the approach of simplifying. And feel free to ask any questions as we go through these. Item 4, at a last conversation commission meeting, we have moved the definition of toxic from section 7 up into section 4 per Clark County's recommendation. And then under item 4I, you'll see the first reference to Steptoe Valley within the meadow unit. So clearly defining the meadow versus the mountain units there. We've got Carson Lake added to this section and Argenta in Lander County. And then again, you'll see section 7 has been struck because we took the definition of toxic and moved it under section 4. Any questions before moving on?
Just one real quick, and I didn't notice it until you just went over it, so that's why we do these things. It's helpful. Do we need to renumber, like section 4 if we're removing section 3?
That is correct.
Yeah, and I read right through it last time, so I appreciate you going over it. Otherwise,
Okay, moving on to section 504-140, dealing with campfires. Under section 2, we added campfires are permitted in the following wildlife management areas in accordance with federal and state wildfire restrictions. We felt a need to go ahead and make sure we were managing campfires according to state and federal standards. And then we added under section 2G, allowing Steptoe Valley Wildlife Management areas fires to occur within the mountain unit. Moving on to section 504-145, restrictions on camping. Under 2G, we added Steptoe Valley Wildlife Management Area mountain unit greater than a half a mile from the Success Summit Road. Basically, we're allowing camping in all those mountain units on the Blue Diamond properties, greater than a half mile from the Success Summit Road. Within a half mile of the Success Summit Road, we're restricting camping to only those designated campsites. And we're still working through that process, which sites will remain open. There's a few we're considering to close for resource concerns, but by and large, the majority of those existing Blue Diamond campsites will remain in place. But we want to make sure people are camping in those designated campsites and not have it wide open because of resource concerns, camping on the meadow, getting stuck in the meadow, tearing up the meadow, those sort of things.
Hey, Mark, real quick on that one while we're on it, and White Pine Cab brought it up. Is there any way to wrap G and H into one? Because it is kind of a little, to me at least, it's a little awkward separated like that. I think you could wordsmith that and combine the two, maybe. Just my opinion, and I might be the only one, but it does seem a little awkward to me.
Yeah, we can certainly consider, this is where we arrived at the deadline we had to submit for support material deadlines, but we can certainly consider that and how to streamline and make things read as clear as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to NAC 504-160, discussing the construction and use of hunting blinds. We've tried to simplify this section. You can see some of the edits there. So basically, except as otherwise provided in section 7, a person may construct a hunting blind on any wildlife management area if the department has no obligation to protect privately constructed blinds or arbitrate the use of priority of use of such blind. A blind must be portable or temporary and made of native material. We struck and tried cleaning up quite a bit of that language. Nobody in the department really recalled why it was what it was. So hopefully this provides some simplifications and clarity. We added section 2 for the purpose of turkey hunting. Hunters will be limited to the use of one portable blind on the Argenta WMA. And as discussed in Las Vegas at the last commission meeting, there's quite a few folks on Argenta setting up multiple blinds, sort of reserving their space. And that was an issue we recognize. And as we're managing these properties, trying to address those issues and conflicts. And then we added item 7, just requiring all portable blinds must be removed daily. And then what you guys haven't seen is the trapping section. I believe we added that from the last meeting. So NAC 504-170 dealing with trapping. We recognized we had not added the Bruno River WMA or Carson Lake WMA, so that's been added under section 2. And then we're also suggesting that trapping is prohibited within a half a mile of those sites designated for camping, like along Blue Diamond, those campsites. And that's mainly to protect any campers with dogs, kids, just more of a safety issue. Under NEC 504-320, dealing with Pole Canyon, most of these remain the same as presented last time. We did add building or having campfires per Commissioner McNitch's suggestion. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mark? I do have one, Mark, in relation to the blinds on the wildlife management areas, the blind, not the portable blinds, but the temporary native material blinds. Do we have, and we've seen it, and you probably could even find it in the Steptoe management areas where guys build the blinds or gals build the blinds out of the native material, and then the hunt gets done and they don't get taken down. I don't know if there's any way to tackle that, but it happens a lot. You see it a lot over Nevada, you know, but it's, as if it's specifically on a wildlife management area, if that's something that we do want to put that burden on the hunter, you know, because it does happen a lot. We've all probably seen it.
Yeah, and that's part of why we wanted it to be native material, so it's not 2x4s and more of a permanent fixture. Some of those things may be okay up on the mountain unit, not necessarily desired on some of the meadow units, other properties. This is one we will provide, hopefully, some greater clarification. I know White Pine Cab had some confusion or was asking for us to clarify, and I think through another round of review, a little more comprehensive review with our law enforcement division, we'll find better language there.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions, or Director Janae?
Yeah, for the record, and just to add on to that conversation around those blinds, the native material ones, as long as they're made from, you know, material that's growing on site, I don't know that it's a big deal. We've got some of those that are historic, but if you tear them down, then they just got to go cut a whole bunch more material the next year, and so you kind of end up with a little bit of habitat modification that you really didn't plan for. And so in the sense of, I guess we could probably address them as needed. And many of those, in those circumstances, they aren't problems. We just leave them. And the following year, somebody just adds more fresh native material to it.
Okay, 10-4. All right, any cab comment in Reno? Steve came all the way from Ely. He's got to get his comment in on it.
I'm gonna be nice. Okay, Steve Marcus, White Pine County. Basically, only have two things: restrictions on use of firearms and ammunition. And actually, this is an old item. It's number 2. Deer may be hunted on Mason Valley and, well, that's stricken. Wayne Kirsch and Argenta wildlife management areas only by persons using. The problem with that, and it's not really not a problem, but it's the way it's worded, deer. There's also a ton of antelope, and we have occasional transient elk that come through. So can people hunt them, or can they only hunt deer? We'd like to see it go to big game. That's the first thing. And the second thing was blinds. It wasn't, we didn't have any problem with the meadow unit. The only problem that the elk hunters and the deer hunters are concerned about was portable blinds must be removed daily. Sometimes they'll sit in a blind 3 days because if you put it down, put it up, take it down every day, it can mess with your success odds. You know, with scents and stirring things up every day, putting it up, taking it down. That was about the only thing that was left unanswered. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional cab comment in Reno? Doesn't look like any cab comment on Zoom. Okay.
For the record, Paul Dixon, Clark County. I appreciate the changes made to date in this regulation but we still had some questions under the Pole Canyon Cooperative Management Area. One of them is under 504-320 subheading 2. We thought you could simplify by just saying mechanized transport rather than trying to say motorized vehicles, electric vehicles, assisted, just mechanized transport. And that covers a wider range of things than what you have listed there. And I think it meets the intent. And the last thing is when you're talking about transport in there, are there and does there have to be any ADA rules, as I mentioned last time, for those people that have ADA disabilities for their access to this Pole Canyon area or not, because it's on private land? We did not know. The next comment was under subheading 3. We felt that rather than have animal assisted access except for horses or mules, just basically we thought we could change it to something like to pack animals and not restricted to horses or mules. So, because sometimes people put a pack on a dog. Some people in the state have llamas that they pack stuff with. God knows that somebody might bring that in. Do we want to be restrictive to that? So basically using the word pack animals might be better. And then under subheading 4, basically should be clarified to state permanent non-endow erected dwellings. Basically you have the commercial, what was it? I think I read that one wrong. I'm going to take that one back. I thought they had something about erecting blind or commercial stuff under that, and I guess I made a mistake, but I'll take that back. But I have those 3 comments, the other comments there, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Any additional cab comment on Zoom? Okay, any public comment in Reno? Any public comment on Zoom? No. All right, with that, I'll bring it back to the commission. And again, I think where we're at today, I don't necessarily know if we need to do anything. It's just a workshop. I think, Mark, you know some of our comments or concerns, so, and I know you guys are still working on it, so I think we're good for today. All right, thank you. All right, with that, we will go to agenda item number 18C, Commission General Regulation 513, Executive Order Regulations, Management Analysis, Megan Manfredi and Kaylee Musso. The commission will hold a workshop to consider amending chapters 488, 501, 502, 503, and 504 of the Nevada Administrative Code pursuant to Executive Order 2023-003.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the commission, Management Analyst Megan Manfredi for the record. So earlier this year, Governor Lombardo issued Executive Order number 3 that directed every executive branch, department, agency, board, and commission to undertake a review of the regulations, submitting a report to the governor's office that details how those regulations could be removed, streamlined, or clarified. So the Regulation Simplification Committee worked earlier this year to determine and refine those regulations. That was submitted in the governor's report in May. That report was also shared with the commission in May, their May's meeting. And so with the lift of the regulation freeze that was also included in Executive Order 3, we can now move forward with these regulation changes. And so the department is requesting 2 additional amendments to the regulations before you. The first is to the Turkey Harvest Survey Regulation found in NAC 502-407, beginning on page 5. The second is to the Bonus Point Regulation in NAC 502-4188, found on 9. But let's start with page 5, which is actually page 6, where you will see that change. So in NAC 502-407, we are requesting the addition of the phrase, all of which must be received on or before the deadline for the application of spring turkey. So in subsection 3B of that regulation. So that whole 3B we're requesting to read, submits to the department the properly completed questionnaire issued as part of the turkey tag or the information required by the questionnaire, all of which must be received on or before the deadline for the application of spring turkey. So this change would align turkey with similar business rules to that of the big game questionnaire deadlines found in NAC 502-405. Okay, so on page 9 is the bonus point regulation in NAC 502-4188. And we are requesting moose to be depicted in subsection 14, aligned with the other big game species. So basically broken out into antlered moose, antlerless moose, and then wild turkey. And so 14 antlered moose, 15 antlerless moose, and 16 would be wild turkey. So after speaking with LCB, once the department submitted those proposed changes, a few things were not included in this version compared to the version the committee settled on. Those things that were not included include the wildlife rehabilitator updated terminology, so it will stay as raptor rehabilitator. Those were through a handful of those NACs. Changes to 503330, we wanted to combine sections 1 and 2 into a single section. LCB, that one was denied by LCB, so it'll stay the same. Also, 503390 was determined to be necessary, and so we've kept that whole. It will not be included in these changes. 504320 removed Crittenden Dake, and 504488 regarding possession of large progenies are not included in here. Those two regulation changes were included in our simplification that we did in 2019, 2020, so we didn't have to redo those changes. And so with that, that's a lot of regulations wrapped into one, but I'm happy to answer any questions or directions that you might have. Also, Management Analyst Musso is here to assist me if needed.
All right, any questions? Commissioner Wise.
Yeah, I have one. On page 13 and 15, under where it talks about a species of wildlife that's listed as threatened or endangered by Fish and Wildlife Service, there's that like little enter arrow in both cases, and I just wanted some clarification on how or why that was being used or what the intention was there. I didn't know if it meant something or if that was just a carryover.
Thank you, Commissioner Wise, for the question. Management Analyst Kaylee Musso for the record. I am not positive on why LCB does that. I've noticed it on a number of our regulations, and I've never thought to ask. I don't know if Deputy Attorney General has an answer to that or if he knows why, but I can figure that out and get back to you next time.
Deputy Attorney General Greg, I don't have a good answer. I assumed it was just the way that they sort of delineated the end of all of the subparts and we're going back to a modifier for the entirety of that regulation. But I don't have anything better than that.
Okay, thanks.
And then I was just going to point out on page 5, or, I mean, if I'm reading this in its context correctly, it should just basically state that the questionnaire must be received by the department in the deadline established in the annual regulation of the commission, correct? It's kind of saying unless we establish one, it's turned in at the date we establish one, so.
Thank you for the question.
Shorten that up.
Commissioner Walters. So that regulation change has been included in commission regulation already. It is in the application deadlines and something regulation. But it is already established for this year and will be reintroduced to the commission in January. So you'll see it
Right, so
there.
it's an annual.
It is, yes. It's included already in an annual regulation.
But I agree, it does read a little odd there, Commissioner Walter, the way that's worded.
Thank you, Chairman Cavillia. Kaylee Musso again for the record. I think we could change that to read, received by the department in accordance with the deadline established in commission regulation.
Thank you. All right, any additional questions or comments from the commission? Okay, seeing none, I'll take it out for cab comment. Any cab comment? Seeing none in Reno, any cab comment on Zoom? No, okay, any public comment in Reno? Any public comment on Zoom? Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to the commission. And again, this is a workshop item, so I don't believe we need to take any action. A couple little noted changes. I know you guys will take care of them, so I think we're good. Oh, go ahead.
Would it be okay if the department moved forward with the requested changes for the turkey questionnaire and the bonus point regulation that we noted earlier?
Yes, I think
Okay.
that was, yeah. I was gonna just say that this was just a workshop, so when you, if you'd like a motion, we can make one, but I think you understand the direction that,
Okay.
of the discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. With that, we'll go to agenda item number 19, Commission General Regulation Adoption, Public Comment Allowed. Commission General Regulation 509, License and Vessel Product Refunds, Data and Technology Services Administrator Kim Munoz. The commission will consider and may take action to approve amending Nevada Administrative Code 502 and 488 to allow the department to authorize the department authority to provide refunds on licenses and vessel productions. I'm losing my ability to read, I think. Go ahead.
For the record, Kim Munoz, Division Administrator of the Debts Division. The department is seeking to adopt the modifications to this regulation to give us the authority to refund all or portions of the fees collected. This is an adoption of this. If you remember on the first reading, we do want to strike that very last sentence for both chapters 488 and 502 of item number 1. So instead, we want to strike that any such refund must be made to the person who made the fee. Just as a reminder, we do have sometimes, if a spouse has passed, we will return the portion of the fees collected to the family member or a spouse. That's why we would like that sentence strike. With that, I will take any questions that the department or the commission has.
All right, any questions? That's a pretty straightforward one. All right, any cab comment in Reno? Okay, seeing none, any cab comment on Zoom? Any public comment in Reno? Any public comment on Zoom? Okay, with that, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Keel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Caviglia. With that, I'll go ahead and move to adopt Commission General Regulation 509, License and Vessel Product Refunds as presented.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously with Vice Chair Rogers and Commissioner Barnes absent. Okay, with that, we'll go to agenda item number 20. Bighorn Sheep Ram Specialty Tag Review, Regulation Review for possible action, Data and Technology Services Administrator Kim Munoz and Game Division Administrator Sean Espinoza. The commission will review Bighorn Ram Specialty Tag seasons and unit closures and may decide to make changes to the method used to limit the maximum number of specialty tags for every unit group that has an open season. The commission regulations presented at the January 2023 commission meeting have not provided the expected results, and that department is seeking an improved method for limiting the number of rams that can be harvested from bighorn ram hunt units or unit groups by specialty tag holders. And I guess just a real quick, on the Desert Bighorn Heritage Tags this year, we had a little bit of a, I guess we could call it a hiccup, I think, with what was intended with the regulation that was originally approved, so that's why we're back at this spot. So Sean can take it over.
Good morning, Chairman Caviglia and members of the commission. Sean Espinoza, Game Division Administrator for the record. So we've met on this quite a few times already, and we came to the consensus that at least the initial and easiest way to deal with this would be to establish a hotline, much like we do for bears, and place the onus back on the hunter for identifying which units would be open and closed during the hunt. So we've established that hotline with IT services with the state of Nevada, and we can carry forward with that. But that was the solution that we have to this particular issue at this time.
Okay, so I guess just for today, is it just, how does the commission proceed with approving that? Like, do we just direct you guys to utilize that hotline? And this would be for 2024, not, I mean, the 2023 hunts are active. And the CR for the 2024 hunts was approved in January of 2023, so.
Yes, thanks for the question. That would be, we would need to probably place some language in CGR in January, I believe, to identify the hotline and make that available.
For the record, Kim Munoz, Data and Technology Services Division Administrator. Yes, when I present the January CRs for the 2024 season, I will also amend the Heritage 2024 to include the hotline and require any tag holders to call in for those sheep tags.
And then I guess for clarity too, everybody knows this is my world. On the heritage tag too, we need to add in the language we have on the other specialty tags that the management ram hunts are not included in the chart, I believe.
Yes, that's the intent.
Okay. And then I guess one last question. We received a letter or multiple letters this year regarding the dream tags, or not one was a dream tag, one was a heritage tag, but not having the ability to hunt unit groups where there's 1 or 2 tags. And I guess I myself would ask the department to take a look at that and if we want to open it up to all the tags as well. Because that was part of if we've all received the letters on the California side of that.
Yeah, that's correct. And we could probably establish that in a table in the hunt book, but that information wouldn't be available until we publish the hunt book.
Correct. And it'd be the same chart we have now, but you'd basically get rid of that first, the first row in that table.
Right. Agreed.
And I'm not saying we do that. I'm saying maybe that's something if we're going to look at this, that's something else to look at on that list. But Deputy Director Scott.
Thanks, Chairman Caviglia. So one of the challenges we have is that you have somebody who's waited decades potentially to draw that tag, and if there's only one tag available in a unit, you could have 2 other hunters that could go in prior to the opening of that season, which is why we have that 0 there. We have had this happen before. Years ago when we had the Shawabis open, there was 1 tag available, and Heritage Tag went in and removed the big ram out of there. And so that's why this would occur. I guess we could leave this in place, but we could put specific closures in place as well, so that on the tag that we issue, it could say pursuant to CR, whatever, that open units are this, or closed units are this. So we could specify on the tag exactly what units are open and what units are closed, and that might provide some clarity for those people as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the chart works. I really do. And if there's, and I don't know, originally when this was proposed, this whole chart came in front of the TAC and then the commission a couple years ago. It was a while ago, and we actually had a separate chart for the California bighorn versus the desert, right? And then that chart got combined into one. But I guess it is on the heritage and I think next year it'll just be the Silver State. The dream tag is going to go away because we don't have enough dream tabs for California, so it's really just 1 tag. But they're way limited on what they can hunt. That would be the only concern there. As far as the deserts go, you got the whole state to hunt. It'd really be on the California side. But I'm just throwing it out there, and if we want to maintain that same chart, I get that too. But we I guess backing up a little more, we had some issues, I would say, on the California tag side this year, and then also, like I said earlier, on the desert side, kind of some unintended consequences. This is the first year we had utilize this regulation, and it seems like always the first year there's just stumbling blocks that everybody up here and at the department, we just can't get over, but.
Yeah, Mike Scott for the record. So when we come back in January with a commission general regulation for this, or a commission regulation for this. We will probably try to make sure that there's communication going both ways, so the hunters are required to call in to the 1-800 number. But if we do have a ram harvested in a unit, we're going to be contacting the remaining tag holders so that they know that that unit's closed, basically. And so, but what we're going to ask for is for their actual address, not a P.O. box, their actual email address, not a tag broker email address. We're going to ask for if they have a inReach, a satellite communicator for themselves and for their guides, so that we have communication going every which way, because they do have 5 days to check in that animal. So if we could still have the same situation occur where we have additional animals harvested out of a unit that we don't want that to take that extra harvest on. And then the other part of it is that we would ask that when they harvest, they let us know, just like bear hunters do. And so again, we don't have to wait those 5 days. We learn when that harvest is, and then we get the word out to the other hunters. So that'll all probably be part of this regulation.
Okay. All right, any commission questions or comments?
Another concern that one of the individuals that complained to the department was that the nonprofit group that they purchased the tag from, all that information they received indicated that was inconsistent with what our policy stated, and that it was for all units. So all I'm suggesting is that any nonprofit organization that is selling those tags is that they communicate with the department so that the areas are clear when they purchase the tag.
All right, this is an action item, so any cab comment in Reno? Any cab comment on Zoom? No. Okay, any public comment in Reno? Any public comment on Zoom? All right, with that, we'll bring it back to the commission. And I guess we're not going to take any action today. So this will be just with the expectation that we'll see this in January for the 2024 heritage tax. All right, okay, thank you. All right, agenda item number 21, future commission meetings and committee assignments, Secretary Janae and Chairman Cavilla for possible action. The commission meeting is scheduled for January 26 and 27, 2024 in Reno Sparks. The commission will review and discuss potential agenda items for that meeting. The commission may change the date, time, and meeting location at this time. The chairman may designate and adjust committee assignments and add or dissolve committees as necessary at this time. Any anticipated committee meetings that may occur prior to the next commission meeting may be discussed. Right off the bat, I was notified this morning we are going to meet this go around, or in January, we're going to meet in Sparks at the Sparks Legislative Building. So for that January 26 and 27 meeting.
Yeah, just to clarify, I was going to announce it multiple times. It will be at the Sparks Legislative Building on 745 4th Street in Sparks. So don't show up here in January, otherwise you're going to be alone, and there'll be other things going on in this building. So we'll again announce it, but please spread the word, and we'll try to highlight it as much as we can.
Okay, and then I had, there will definitely be a TAC committee meeting prior to that January meeting with the date and time to be determined. I think we're going to look at Commission Policy 24 will be back, I would anticipate. And then also the subdivision map item, the wildlife management area item, the executive order item, and then that, in addition to the season setting, which is big in itself, also that heritage tag for 2024 regulation as well.
Yes, so again, for the record, Alan Janae, hope everybody enjoyed this meeting because the next one's going to be quite jam-packed full of items. We will have, in addition to the items you mentioned, we'll have the draft predation management plan back. We'll be dealing with big game seasons. We will be dealing with heritage tag, dream tag, PIW, Silver State, seasons and quotas, and then the big game application deadline. So it will be another pretty extensive meeting, and we'll try to look and see if there's opportunities for another division overview, but if it is too overwhelmed, we'll push it. But
Deputy Director Scott. Deputy Director Mike Scott, for the record. One other thing that we do have, Director Janae mentioned it earlier, we do have a petition for a mountain goat archery season that we'll just probably hear it on Friday, and then we could take action on it on Saturday.
Okay. All right. Be busy January. I guess this was an action item, so I guess any cab comment in Reno? Okay, seeing none, any cab comment on Zoom? All right, any public comment in Reno? Public comment on Zoom?
Mr. Chair, this is Jana Wright, Clark County. I hope that the meeting in Sparks is going to be available by Zoom. It's important that we be able to participate on season setting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on Zoom? No. All right, with that, we will go to the public comment period. A public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. No action can be taken by the commission at this time. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Persons making comment are asked to begin by stating their name for the record. So any public comment in Reno? Seeing none. Any public comment on Zoom? No? All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.